This is about defending democracy. This is no longer Democrats versus Republicans. What do you want your kids to believe in? There must be give and take.
This is White Flag with Joe Walsh.
Let me say at the outset that I am a huge fan of the woman I'm about to have a conversation with. I'm a huge fan of Nina Turner for two reasons. In the world of politics, she's a rarity. She's genuine in her beliefs, and she's fearless in defending those beliefs. Those are the kinds of political people I like. Nina Turner, you know her, educator, activist, former Ohio State Senator, former member of the Cleveland City Council. She co-chaired Bernie Sanders' run in 2020. She ran for Congress, ran for Ohio Secretary of State. This is really cool. She just has a new show that just premiered about a week ago on the Young Turks called Unbossed. Monday through Friday, every day. Check it out, YouTube/Unbossed TYT. Excited to watch that. Here's the history of this conversation right here. You may think, why the hell is Tea Party Joe Walsh talking to genuine progressive Nina Turner? Nina, I could be off on my timing, but a few weeks back, you had a great tweet. You said, reparations now, damn it. I don't think you said damn it. And I said, Nina, I disagree, but man, I'd love to talk about that. And so here we are. You graciously said, okay, I'm willing to have a conversation, not a debate, a conversation. Thank you, Nina. It means a lot, and I think this will be helpful because I think this issue of reparations is an issue that's hot. It's an issue that a lot of people don't understand. And as we start, I think in my head, my heart, yeah, I oppose reparations. But let's start here, Nina. Like when you say reparations, tell me what you mean.
Well, I want to thank you, Congressman, so much for having me.
Don't you dare call me Congressman. You call me.
Okay. So I knew you were going to say something, but I just wanted to put it out there at least one time. You earned that. I just, thank you for reaching out in that way. Social media can be such a vile and vicious place, as you know, and I know. And I'm a lightning rod. Either people love me or they
stay that way, Nina. Really, stay that way. No, I'm that way too. Stay that way.
Yeah, you're that way. Okay, and I appreciate that. So just having this opportunity, and I hope we will have more discussions, whether we agree or don't agree with one another. This is beautiful. So when I say reparations, and those who are far better, more experts, we're going to talk about at least two of those experts on your show today. Yeah. There needs to be a payment, if you will, to the descendants of persons who were enslaved in this country for the damage done by the federal government. And what that payment looks like, it can be direct payments, as in money, and a combination of programs that help to lift those descendants out of despair generationally. And this is not foreign to this country, Joe. Yeah. This is not foreign to other countries. We know what Germany did. We know what this country did for Japanese Americans, which we did to them was absolutely wrong during World War II. This need for reconciliation. Remember during apartheid, and South Africa is nowhere near where it should be for Black Africans. They did at least put a council together where people could come and talk about the impact of apartheid, the reconciliation, commission that they put together. We have never done anything like that in the United States of America. And when you look at disparity in this country, when you look at the black-white wealth gap in this country, it still persists even in the 21st century, despite some gains. I'm talking about generational, from 1865 all the way to present day. This country owes a debt. And this country, and my last point for now, because we'll be making many points, is I want you to think about the hegemonic nature of the United States of America. It would not be, and this is not just me, it would not be in such a hegemonic state had it not been for that forced labor of Africans and then their descendants.
Hey, Nina, one quick question and update me. am I wrong? Did the House last year pass, or it just got out of committee, the notion of having a commission to look into it?
HR 40, it did, and I know you recall, because I know knew Congressman John
Yeah,
Conyers very well.
yeah.
I mean, he started
Great man,
this,
by the
and
way.
that's just, yeah, absolutely. And we all have our flaws and our faults,
All
so
of
we will
us.
put that out
Yeah.
there to be human. People kill me when they try to act so damn self-righteous.
Amen.
And
Amen.
especially when you're in the public light, as you and I
Yes.
have been and continue to be, people, it's a microscope on you all the damn time. It drives me crazy. But Congressman John Conyers
And
actually
by the way, Nina,
started.
let me interrupt you for a second. Again, this is why I respect you, and this is why I feel like your brother. There is a microscope on public people, and I always found that most politicians then shy away and are very careful and don't say what they really mean. And I always tried to say what I mean. It got me in trouble. You do the same.
Oh yeah, you and I are making that good trouble that Congressman John Lewis talked
Yes.
about. Maybe for some folks it's not good. And Joe, I'm glad you brought that particular point up, because throughout my political career, I have held it in. I
Yeah.
have held it back. It's the Kenny Rogers song. You got to know the Gambler, which is one of my favorites. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold
Yeah.
them, know when to run.
Yeah.
And so you find times where you're kind of warring with yourself. I'm sure you've had the same experience about how far do I go? How true to myself should I be, even if it's at the scorn of other people? And I'm just at a stage in my life and the things that I want to see for all people. Because what I want for my people being, the
Yeah.
people who ethnically and racially,
Yeah.
is what I want for all people fundamentally. And that is to be able to live a good life, to be able to have a clear opportunity and pathway to do that. There is a difference between equality and equity.
Yeah.
And this is what we're talking about today, Joe. We're talking about equity. Equity says, so you are taller than me. And I want to use height because there's this great cartoon that somebody put together, but it has people standing on crates. And it has a person that is, none of the people are equal in height, but they're trying to look over the fence. Well, technically and physically, the person who is the shortest will need more crates
Yeah.
to see over the fence than the next tallest person and the next tallest person. I want people to kind of visualize that. That's what people like me mean when we talk about equity.
Well,
Because
and Nina,
equity may mean,
what's great about that metaphor is that's the kind of fun stuff I would love to kind of debate with you, is what government's role should be in helping those people who are shorter. But like, we're living in this crazy time where we don't even debate or talk about issues anymore because it's all the madness of both these political parties. And
yes.
Nina, I proudly call myself woke. I'm still a conservative because I believe in limited government and the free market. But I'm woke because I didn't if you and I were having this conversation 6-7 years ago, I wouldn't have understood a lot of what you were saying, because as a white guy, I didn't get it. I now understand the systemic racism. And I've always understood that no group of people in this country is owed what Black Americans are owed because of our original sin. No doubt about that. Like, there's a moral case for reparations.
That's right.
My biggest craziness, Nina, my biggest objection is I just don't know how it's workable.
Doing things like you and I are doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
People have to suspend their disbelief, because that point that you made, it assumes that just because Black American descendants of persons enslaved in the United States get, that other groups who are not that lose.
Yeah.
That's what that premise assumes. But if we look at it from another way, which is to right the moral, you use the right word, to right the immoral wrongs, the original sin of this nation frees us all. That is it, that we are all connected. And, invoking the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and there are many others.
Yeah.
He was so powerful in his eloquence, though. What affects one directly affects us all indirectly. that we really do need to have a truth and
Where
reconciliation,
did
and
he,
maybe that's where we start.
Nina? And I apologize for not knowing this. Did Martin Luther King ever speak on reparations specifically? I should know this,
He
but I don't.
did. No. He did. Now he might not have necessarily called it
Yeah,
reparations, but he talked about the check
yeah,
marked insufficient funds.
yeah,
And as he talked about, a lot of conservative, and Joe, I'm not even saying a lot of conservatives and neoliberal white
yeah,
folks
yeah,
think they can just throw out quotes from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that makes it okay.
yeah,
It doesn't make it okay because they don't want to deal with the radical king. Dr.
yeah,
Cornel West wrote a whole book about the radical king. Dr. King challenged this country on materialism, militarism, and racism. He did. So it wasn't just I have a dream that people should be judged by the content of
yeah.
their character. It wasn't just that. He put a whole bunch of stuff on that. So yes, indirectly, Dr. King did talk about reparation and what the debt is owed to Black Americans in this country. And the premise, the book that I want to use, and I want to encourage
Yeah.
you and your listeners to read this book. And it's not the only one, but it's the one that I'm using to inform our conversation. The title of it is From Here to Equality, and it's written by Dr. William A. Darity, and that's Darity Jr., and his wife, A. Kristen
Okay.
Mullen. And it is a phenomenal book, and it is a great primer to help get an understanding. Not the only one, but it's the one that I'm recommending in our discussion.
So I would agree with a couple things, Nina. And I think it's kind of cool right now that America is going through a long needed course correction in how we talk about our history and race relations. We need it, and white people like me are getting defensive and pushing back against it. Tough. We need this. We need better schools, more jobs, better nutrition programs, all the rest. There is a debt to be paid for our original sin. I guess where I drop off, Nina, and help me, is when we talk about direct payments from people to people, that's where like it gets unworkable to me. Like, who are the people who are getting them, and who are the people who are paying these reparations?
Yeah.
That gets really complicated and I think divisive, but give me your thoughts.
No, but it doesn't have to be, and that's why you must read the book. So
Okay.
the who, as defined by these two professors, are Black American descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. The how and the how much, we have to add up the harms. They say either we're going to add up the harms or we're going to capture the economic impact of the harms, one of the two. Which one we use depends on how we have the conversation and how we set the frame. If, for example, we want to use the baseline, and these authors argue that the baseline should start with the black white wealth disparity, that disparity. So it's about $350,000 per person. If we started there, and you take the 40 million black people who are descendants of black persons who were enslaved, we can do the math there. I think it's about 14, 15 trillion dollars if we're looking at direct payment. Now that may fluctuate as we have this conversation, but if we want to talk pure dollars and cents, I would argue though, so this is what the authors from Here to Equality, because you're right, we got to set what is the frame for the conversation.
Because
We got to
because
start.
you're right, Nina. Because like, to me, the most important question is the who, and then the who pays. Like, who
The
qualifies?
federal government pays.
Yeah, no,
I
well,
mean,
right, but then that would be
yeah.
kind of all of us then. So like who are the archival records of our enslaved population is like ridiculously incomplete. So how do we know? Is it based on skin color? Is it based on DNA? What percent of African American you have in you? And then, Nina, the other thing is, you know better than I, we're not a white black country anymore. We're all kind of mixed, and we have lots of immigrants with different shades and colors. What if a white person is descendant from slaves? Finds out. Crazy
I
stuff.
mean, we're
But
not, well, not necessarily crazy, but I think we're complicating this.
Okay.
And I get where you're going. We're not just going to look at phenotype because we have black immigrants to this country who whose ancestors were not enslaved on
Exactly.
this soil.
Yeah.
So you're right. It does get a little complicated, and that's why we're fixated on that. It would be a combination of things. Maybe DNA is one of those things. You are correct in that the records that were kept
Are
about
shitty,
black,
shitty, incomplete.
yeah, they are, because the white slave owner did not really give a damn.
Exactly.
They didn't give
Exactly.
I really want to use the F word.
They didn't give a
didn't
fuck,
care.
Nina. They didn't.
They
Exactly.
didn't give a fuck, Joe, because Africans and then their descendants were treated as chattel. So I think I want people to try as much as they can to wrap their minds around that you had human beings
Yeah.
who were treated worse than animals. And I am not an advocate. I don't want any living creature
Amen.
to be mistreated, but I want them to understand that black children eating out of troughs
Yeah.
like pigs,
Yeah.
that black families were stripped away from one another without regard for their psychological well-being, that black women were raped at the fucking whim
Yep.
of not only the slave master himself, but the handlers on the plantation.
Yep.
That white women are complicit. Because sometimes, Joe, we want to give white women a pass. I'm not giving them a goddamn pass on this. They were complicit in it. They engaged in rape. Black men were raped and taken advantage of. I want you to think about that happening generation after generation, that you could not control your autonomy. We want to talk about abortion, and I get that. Now, I'm a proponent,
Yeah.
as choice.
Yeah.
I'm pro women getting a choice.
Right.
But this is the thing. That is a harsh reality for people in this country to deal with. That original fucking sin. That is what it is. It is abominable.
Hey, Nina.
It is an abomination.
And it continued after slavery. And Nina, like I remember,
Well,
I remember last year finding out about the Tulsa race riots. I had never been taught
Yeah.
about the Tulsa race riots. Most of us white folk hadn't.
For jealousy, Joe, what was the crime of those folks? They built their own community. They had hospitals and movie theaters and airplanes. I mean, they were the shit.
No, look, hey,
And so
Nina,
white-
I agree. Nina, I think you're so spot on. I think, and white people are uncomfortable, and we should be uncomfortable because this is a long overdue course correction. And I know you and I would agree on this. Our failure to pay reparations directly to freed slaves right after the Civil War is one of the greatest injustices ever done by our government. Right then.
Right there. And you bringing me to General Sherman's
Yeah.
Special Order number 15. Because that was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
So what you just laid out was supposed to happen right then and there. That is where the whole concept of 40 acres and a mule actually comes from. And then President Lincoln is assassinated, right? And then you get President Johnson, who was
Yeah.
a Southerner,
Yeah.
and
Boom.
he says,
Forget it.
fuck that.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
So Nina,
Yeah.
you're spot on, my dear, and I agree with you. But now we're 170 some years removed. So then practical questions come up. If Oprah is the descendant of slaves, but some poor black single mom on the south side of Chicago who's working 3 jobs to keep her head above water is not a descendant of slaves, well, come on.
But that's not the measure, Joe.
Help me then.
That's
Help me.
not the measure. People shouldn't. We making this more complicated than it needs to be. Right? Making descendants.
Well, but and again, Nina, I want you to respond to that. But that's my biggest beef. Is it is complicated.
But don't start from that premise,
Okay.
Joe. That would be my ask.
That's fair.
Just don't start from that premise. Remember when the Homestead Act?
Yeah.
Okay. European immigrants were given land. I don't hear nobody up in arms about that. Black folks did not get that same treatment. They didn't get that.
They didn't
land.
get theirs. They should have been given theirs.
They didn't get there. Okay, so we don't have to make this complicated. We're gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna give you something to wrap your mind around. Again, this is coming from the authors of From Here to
You got it.
Equality. the four pillars, and let's talk about the four pillars. So
Yep.
we need a strat because this speaks to, I think, where you're
Got
going.
it.
Because you and I both are going to admit this is absolutely complicated, but I think what continues to complicate it even more is the original premise that I started off from, that if white folks have worked up in their minds that Black America's gain is their loss, that somehow these people are getting something, I put some air quotes up, that they do not deserve. That mucks up everything. So I don't want people to
Well,
struggle with
and
that.
before you go into your four polars, I'll say that Black Americans who are descendants of slaves deserve something. That is true.
Persons
That
enslaved.
is true. But
Yeah.
the real life thing here is that something is going to come from someone, all of us.
Yeah. Why not?
Go ahead.
Because all of us have benefited. White Americans benefit from the hegemonic nature of this country. So you benefit. There is a such thing, Joe, and I know there are poor whites. You know, I
Oh
stand
yeah,
up for
God,
them.
yes you do.
I'm a class person.
Yes, yes.
There's a however. There's white skin privilege in America. Does that mean that all white folks are living the life of luxury? Absolutely not. But there is white skin privilege in America because of the way the nation was founded. So white
Yeah.
folks benefit from that. So why is it so hard to say, you know what, all of us owe this debt? And for the smartasses who want to say I never owned a slave, never enslaved anybody, this is bigger than just enslavement. It is about Jim Crow. It is about
Yeah,
black code.
beyond
It's about
slavery.
Jim Crow. It's about all of that to this very moment. So let's look at the author's four pillars, because I think this
Yep.
will help you and other people who are struggling with this. And you know what? It's okay to struggle with this. It's okay. Here it is. Number one, the strategy for determining eligibility standards, which you laid out, like who.
Yeah.
Number two, the standard for the amount paid. We already talked a little bit about that, and we can continue to debate that. Number three, identification of the party responsible for making the payment. You and I talked that through. And number four, a plan for a form of payment and how will those payments be made. Those are the four pillars laid out by Dr. Darity and Professor Mullen.
Okay.
So now we got a frame to work with. Now we can debate the four pillars, but now we got something to work with. That
No,
is it.
Nina. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. Now, there's a fucking hell of a lot of questions involved in all of those pillars, and you know,
I know.
but
I know.
you make the really good important point, and which is why you and I are talking. All right, let's roll up our sleeves and figure this out. But the who and the who pays and the amount and the how it's done, that is all complicated.
It is, but listen, if it were up to me, I don't think that there's any amount, honestly. I mean, we're going to come up with a number, but deep down, there is really no amount of programs, no amount of cash payments that can ever undo that type of generational damage. The nation would bounce. But you know what? I want us to try to get there, even though I don't believe that
So,
there's an amount.
so that's progressive Nina Turner who just said that. Conservative Joe Walsh would say, nothing will make up for the horror of slavery and Jim Crow. Period.
Period. That's it. And look, we don't even have to go that far. Let's even look at 2008, because I'm old enough to remember living the Great
Yeah.
Recession. Now, the impact of the Great Recession, it hurt us all, no doubt. But what we must come to understand is that there's a disproportionality to the pain. Black folks lost half of their wealth. Their wealth, most middle class people, their wealth is tied into their home, no matter what their ethnic heritage
Yeah.
is. That is a truism.
Yeah.
Their biggest debt is their biggest asset. So for the middle class, people who do own homes, who are in the middle class, their biggest debt and their biggest wealth asset is their home. But when the suffering comes pouring down, Black folks suffer disproportionately. So Black folks lost half of their wealth. That's one thing. The second thing, Joe, is that Black homes, by and large, depending on where you live,
Yeah.
are not worth as much as white homes. So we're losing there too. Now this is 2008. So for those who don't want to travel back in time with us, Joe, they can just rest with us in 2008.
What?
And then there are compounding variables to not having that type of economic security, not having something to pass on to your descendants. Joe, you and I talked, if the 40 acres and a mule had become a reality, imagine what the economics would be
Agreed.
for the Black
A-
community as a whole.
Agreed. So I'm going to piss you off and I'm going to put two
Okay.
practical little worries in front of you again.
All
My
right.
two worries are that two of my worries are this. You've got a 28-year-old young black man who grew up in an upper class suburban neighborhood. He's Ivy League educated. He's an investment banker making a shitload of money, and he's a direct descendant from slaves on Jefferson's plantation. And then you got a super poor single black mom again in the South Side Chicago who's struggling to make ends meet, and she is not a descendant of slaves. How do you reconcile the notion of reparations with two real life examples like that?
I don't think people asked us to do that when the Homestead Act gave 160 acres of land grants to European immigrants. I don't think people did that measure when the United States rightfully gave reparations to Japanese Americans. Again, but let me answer your question directly. I ain't gonna politic. I ain't gonna be a politician. I'm gonna answer this question directly. The measure, Joe, that we're
By the way,
establishing,
you got to run for office again, and I have to too, but continue.
we both do, but the folks come after
I
us.
know,
But
I
we can
know.
have this conversation. If we are establishing that the measure is Black American descendants
Yes.
of persons enslaved in the United States,
Then that
if
wealthy
that's our
black
measure,
investment banker would get.
hey, he would get it. Now, he might refuse to take it. Maybe he might give it to that poor Black single working mother whose ancestors were not enslaved in the United States of America. He might just do that. But the measure is not how successful he is right now. Let's ask the question of how many hurdles he had to jump, mountains he had to climb, and then his parents and his parents' parents and his parents' parents and his parents' parents. Let's try to figure out
Hey,
how hard it was for them to get him to that
this is
place.
why I love you. You didn't run from that question and you gave an honest answer. So here's pesky question number two, and it goes to who pays. So is it just white people who pay? What about other black and brown people in America who are not descendants? What about immigrants who came in post-slavery or even post-Jim Crow? What about other disenfranchised minority groups? All of us pay, right?
Hey, we Americans, yeah, we're gonna put this in the pot, baby. This is a social contract. This is a social contract. And every other immigrant community, I would argue, especially immigrant communities of color, have benefited from the Black struggle. If you look historically at the Black liberation struggle,
Yeah,
Joe, for everything gained, air quotes, but we did gain, I won't put that in air quotes, by the Black community, gains that the Black community deserved, it made this nation a better nation. Let's you and I
yeah,
discuss some examples.
yep,
The Voting Rights Act. Now we know who that was targeted
yeah,
towards for the most part, but everybody gains from that. The Civil Rights Act. Maybe I should have started with that one first. Everyone gains from that. If we look at the Civil War amendments themselves, the 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments to the Constitution, even though there's still some argument out there, we might come back and talk about that, about the 13th Amendment
yeah,
still allows
yeah,
some type of bondage. But if we just take that part out just for a minute, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution abolished slavery. No persons hereforto shall be enslaved. Now, the Constitution never said the word black. But what that means, we know who it was directed towards, even though the cowards didn't have the courage to say black folks. We do know because of that, no person in the United States of America, whether they black, white, Hispanic,
yeah,
somewhere in the middle, will be enslaved in this country. Now, there's an asterisk to that about prison.
right,
We can discuss that another time.
right.
14th Amendment to the Constitution, equal protection under the law. It doesn't say just only black people get protection under the law, even though we know where those amendments were targeted to. So, Joe, I'm just using these as very real examples that you know what in this country, we got to take the bitter with the sweet.
And-
so now everybody in this country.
And I don't want to stop you from preaching because I love it when you preach. So pesky question number 3. If Nina Turner got her way and tomorrow, boom, reparations to every single descendant of slaves in this country. And again, one of the real pesky issues here, Nina, is, and I think a lot of people don't realize this, it's fucking almost impossible to get an accurate idea of who is a direct descendant of slaves. Again, because white people did it, the records suck. But imagine you could. And tomorrow, Nina Turner could put in place reparations. Every descendant gets a big old check. My question to you is, where would it stop? And one sub-question of that is, with what generation? So if we all gave reparations right now, what about black descendants being born in 2 years or 10 years? On that end, where does it stop?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And what if you write a $350,000 check to a black descendant and he's a son of a bitch and he blows it all on whatever and he has a kid 2 weeks later? Does that that child just out? What happens there?
Well, first of all, we don't want to assume that he's gonna blow it. He could be a son of a bitch, and you know what? Maybe he will. But that ain't our business, Joe. That's our business. Shame on the brother if he blows it, but that's
so generationally, would it stop?
You asked me where does it end. I think I kind of answered that already, but I'll say it again. Well, let me directly answer that question. That is a great question for which. Where does it end? I don't have.
And I'm just trying to figure this out. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have a direct answer for where it ends. My flippant answer would be something I said before, which is the United States can never repay the debt. I mean, that is the premise. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try. You can never, ever repay that debt, that atrocity. Now, it is not just about cash payments. We haven't talked about this, but we need problematic things that happen as well. Because really, Joe, we're talking about structural racism. We're talking about institutional racism. And I think a lot of people get this mixed up. Anybody can be a bigot, anybody can be prejudiced. But institutional racism or anti-blackness is a whole nother beast unto itself. The whole anti-blackness that is wrapped into this country is in its institutions. It's in its economic institutions, in its social institutions, in its political institutions. For that must be fixed, and that cannot be fixed with just the $350,000 per black person or black American descendants of persons enslaved. And Joe, I want to, because I had to practice this too, because when I first started teaching Black history, we used people who were slaves. Yeah. But there's new arguments out there about talking about people who were slaves as enslaved. They didn't ask for this. Right. They were enslaved. Their freedoms were taken. They were forced immigrants to this country. That's why it always burns my behind when folks want to talk about immigrants to this country. You leave out a big group of folks, and that is my ancestors who didn't come over here because they wanted to. They were forced to come over here. So that's just another
great point, Nina. Great point. The other where does it stop question I've got is with what groups? What about reparations for Native Americans? What about reparations for Mexican Americans, for other victims of systemic racism? Go ahead.
I didn't mean to jump over you. The country got a lot of sins to answer for, Joe. Right now, I'm talking about my people.
But if we give your people reparations, I gotta believe, and I know you would probably believe, other people are going to be knocking at that door as well.
It's not give; it's what's owed.
If we repay what your people get, thank you. Other groups are going to knock on that door. Native Americans, Asians, and others, asking for theirs as well. Do
People.
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I mean, the black American slavery experience in this country is fucking unique and nothing comes close. Stop, everybody listening to me right now. I acknowledge that. But the history of when government does stuff like this is these programs tend to then broaden out to include other groups. And I could see that happening here.
Oh no, you just answered the question. That's exactly what I was going to say. There is no other experience like that. None.
Yeah.
So that is not to say that there should not be repair to other folks, but what I'm sick and tired of black people being conflated with other people of color. This is a unique experience. There's some things, and this is not, I don't want to, this is not comparing, my pain is worse than yours.
Right.
No, that is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that if we're talking about black American descendants of persons enslaved in the United States, that's what we're talking about, Joe. I'm not talking about them other folks.
Okay.
And I don't mean that
No, I
in a
know.
disrespectful way.
I know.
There is no other experience. Now, the United States of America, Joe, has a lot of sins to answer to. And just as you and I were having a discussion about how black liberation builds and creates liberation for others, you're absolutely right. This may create.
It will, yeah.
Another
and
type of
maybe,
liberation.
right, it will create knocking on the door for a smaller amount, because again, no.
For other folks, it might.
Hey, a couple things, Nina, and then I know you've got to go in a minute, and damn it, we're going to continue this, because I think you're wonderful. Answer me this. I'm a proudly woke conservative who's gotten it, that there's systemic racism in this country, there are injustices that I did not see 7 years ago when I was in Congress. I've always wanted to ask you, a person like you, this question from the other side politically. What progress on race in this country, are you most fired up about? Is there something?
Progress.
Like,
because progress is
we've made,
fleeting.
or I should probably back up and ask Nina Turner the better question. Does Nina Turner think, what the fuck am I thinking? Does Nina Turner think we've made progress? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt we made progress. I could never deny that. And the reason why I say it's fleeting, because it could be snatched back from you.
Yes, thank you.
And we see that happening. I want to use abortion, and I know you and I don't see eye to eye. And I'm just using it as an example.
Yeah.
Just an example.
Yeah.
Had it with Roe v. Wade. Don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
So it's fleeting. Just using that as an example, because I know the whole
Point well taken.
political
Point well taken.
conversation is bigger than just abortion. And I say that as a person that grew up in the black church. My mother was a preacher.
Yeah.
And she probably rolling over in her grave that I'm. So I don't think she is. I think she would. But I'm just. I just want people to be able to control the autonomy of their own bodies and not have to go backwards in time. So all of those kinds of things are fleeting. In other words, that every generation is charged with recognizing the progress that we have made and advancing it, Joe. We're not going to rest on our laurels and say, because there can never be enough progress. So yes, have we made progress, but we need to make even more progress.
It's a work in progress. It's a work in progress.
That's it. That's exactly what it is. Justice is never a final destination. It's always a journey. I used to run track in high school, and I ran the 440 relay, and I was the first leg of the relay. So I want people, just as we gave the analogy of the crate, I want people to think about the teamwork that it takes to run a relay race, that you got to be in sync with your other runners, with your colleagues, and that you are passing a baton. And the first leg of the race, their job is to get at a lead, to get the team a lead.
Yeah.
And the second leg, their job is to keep that lead, but advance it. See?
Yep.
And then the third leg, same job, keep the lead and advance it. And then the anchor has to bring it on home. In this case, in terms of the human condition and the fight or the journey on the justice pathway, there's never a final finish line that we cross. It's never final. We will cross the finish line, but then we got to start the race.
I'm going to ask you one more reparations question, then I'm going to ask you just one or two personal questions, and we will continue this.
Yes, we will.
Because I think direct cash payments to individuals would be so fucking divisive. I think it would tear this country up and we can get into that later. And I believe there's a moral case for something. I really do. But I think this would like divide this country like we ain't never seen it. But my question to you, Nina, is when it comes to reparations, would you be open to just a programmatic financial answer?
Absolutely not.
I love your
Absolutely not.
honesty. I love you.
Black people were property, Joe. My ancestors were fucking property. Absolutely not. And you know what? God damn it, the slaveholders, they got fucking reparations.
Well, you're right, and freed slaves should have at that moment when they were freed, and that's such an injustice.
Free persons, not free
Thank
slaves.
you, freed persons.
Free persons. I know what you mean because I slip up.
So you would, so no,
I am correcting myself.
no, Nina. So Nina Turner says no. Just a bunch of government investment and programs ain't gonna cut it.
Oh hell no, that ain't gonna cut it. Like I said, hegemonic nation, the wealthiest nation on the face of the earth. And then, Joe, my question to you is, why does this have to be divisive? Why? I'm trying to understand. Why is it gonna tear the country apart?
Well,
Why?
And it will. Do I want it to? No. And it goes back to the who and the who pays. And oh my God, you've got Mexicans and other blacks and immigrants who came here 10 years ago. I got to pay what to give who what? It would open up a can of worms like this country ain't never seen. Now, but I don't want to go there, Nina Turner, with you right now because you've got me by the short hairs. We'll continue this. I want to ask you, and I think the world of you, and by the way, I'm going to say it 2 more times. Nina's got a new show out there called Unbossed with the Young Turks. I hope I do this right, Nina. YouTube-Unbossed TYT. Right?
Yep, you did.
Monday through Friday. Check it out. It's just awesome. Nina, 2 personal questions. Well, 1 question, then 1 personal. I'm just going to say the word Kanye, and I want to hear what you say.
Complicated.
Okay. Stop. I'm going to ask you a second question. This is personal because you are a public person, and I get this question sometimes because I'm a public person, because I'm outspoken. What's one thing, Nina Turner, you wish people understood about you? I love that fucking question. Don't you run from it. I love that fucking question. What's one thing, Nina, that you wish people understood about you?
That I care deeply, and sometimes I'm definitely misunderstood for sure. I mean, a lot of people
Yeah.
are misunderstood.
Yeah.
You know, Stephen Covey, renowned leadership guru, once said that one of my favorite quotes in that atmosphere is seek first to understand and then to be understood. And that's what I take from your question. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. It didn't say seek to agree 100% of the time, but it's just, and so I just wish people would just pause to get more understanding, even if they do not agree. I care so fucking deeply, Joe, and I come at things with my whole being. And sometimes, that may rub people the wrong way. And I will say, because of the skin and the body that I occupy, not only am I a black woman, and maybe we should talk about this at another
Yeah.
time too, because it's not just anti-blackness and racism, but there's also colorism in
Yeah.
this country too.
Yeah.
And black people perpetuate it because it's been, we've been socialized in the same nation as our white sisters and brothers, or our Hispanic sisters and brothers. Hey, it don't matter what your phenotype is. We've all been socialized to see a certain standard of beauty, and that started with the people who created this. Who the framers, the people who decided, not the framers as in the founding fathers, but the people in power, and the people who have had and continue to have most of the power are white people. And so the standards by which people are judged, and so that whole colorism thing comes into play too. So yes, it's hard for me as a woman, it's hard for me as a black woman, and then I am a chocolate sister. And so it makes it that much more harder. And so when I am passionate or impassioned, it is easy for people to describe me as an angry black woman. That was done to me, Joe, when I ran for
Oh,
Congress.
I saw it.
And there was a certain segment of community that decided that that's what they were going to do, and because people still play into those stereotypes, because it's psychological. Sometimes either people are doing it explicitly or implicitly, but those are the biases, and you don't even know. Sometimes you don't even know why you got the bias. It is because the society by which we were all socialized in put it in you. and you got to deconstruct your construction. I always taught my students when I taught African American history that we all have an obligation. This is for Black folks too, to deconstruct our
Yeah.
construction, to understand why we're doing what we're doing. It is embedded in us, and so it's easier to use the angry Black woman trope on a darker skinned Black woman.
Yeah. Hey, Nina, God, you're.
No, let's end on something.
No. We are. I'm getting because I'm.
Yeah,
Look, I'm dark.
I went.
No. I'm glad you did, and I am going to end with hope. I'm going to make 3 quick points, then I'm going to let you go. Again, check out Nina's new show, Unbossed. YouTube Unbossed TYT. Great stuff, Nina. This is why I have hope. 5-6 years ago, and you and I wouldn't be sitting down. That's probably more on me than you. I am a fucking libertarian Tea Party guy. You're a proud progressive. And the fact that you and I can listen, and by the way, fucking model how to have conversations about tough issues, it gives me hope. And I just think you rock. Stay fearless. We'll continue this.
You too.
Thanks, Nina.
Thank you for listening. Remember to listen, share, and follow White Flag with Joe Walsh on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere great podcasts are found. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. This has been White Flag with Joe Walsh.